Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tim Sullivan, Chief Advisory Officer at Zonda. I'm here today with Steve Ladurantaye, our VP of Content, and we are here putting together a quick take on what's going on with the NAR settlement. There's been a lot of conversation, a lot of questions, and it's dynamic. It continues to change, but for what we know right now, we're going to share that with you today. So Steve, if you would, give a little bit of a wave, and then let's turn our cameras off. I'm going to go through a couple things to set us up, and then I'll call you back. So ladies and gentlemen, here we go. A couple things to set up the conversation. I want to make sure you know where we come from. The Zonda advisory team is here to help you with any real estate questions, whether it's in the multifamily, for sale, build for rent, and ultimately it's solutions to help you make the great decisions in development. And we are unbelievably thrilled to welcome to the family our friends at BDX. Zonda and BDX have now joined forces. If you're aware of Builder Developer Exchange, Builder Digital Exchange, they're an incredible organization, unbelievable insights to the consumer, and together we're going to do some amazing things. I think you may be also aware of Livable. It's our new home source element. We can leverage networks. It's really cool digital solutions. Please talk to someone on our Zonda team about Livable. And we welcome you to join us at Builder 100. It's coming up in about 6 weeks. It's going to be in Dana Point. It's the preeminent get-together in our industry of capital, home builders, land developers, great thinkers, and we'd love to see you there. So here's the setup. As with NAR and with the world of the brokerage community for resales, their market has gone down significantly. This shows you existing home sales from 2019 to now. And look at where we are, at about a 26% decline from 2019. Oh, Kenny wanted to say, no, you have to wait for a little bit, Kenny. But when we look market by market, notice the two different bars. The first one is year over year, that's the blue, and then the teal is 2019, so going back to 2019. What I hope you pull from this is that we're still down significantly from 2019, and a couple markets, Houston and Orlando, are up just a teeny bit. But there's a little bit more to the conversation. When we look at active listings, and remember, these are listings on the resale side right now. When we look at active listings, they're up since 2020. But you see that little kind of a gray bar, dark green, right in the middle, right under 700,000. That's where we are now. Now, note that that is a 40% decline from 2019. And as we look at some of the markets, San Antonio's popped up a little bit, Austin's a little bit over, and I'll pause on it for a second in Austin. Please, if you're on LinkedIn, check out Brian Glasshagel's most recent post on LinkedIn, because he's trying to debunk some of the media's focus on, the sky is falling in Austin. Have prices declined from a year ago? Potentially. Our mixes and the product mix has changed. But when you look at the pricing in Austin from today, go back 4 years, it's still up significantly. So always bring the context in when we have these conversations. Now back to the active listing elements, look left to right, and I don't think you're going to be surprised to pick out the market that you're in, whether it's Charlotte or Indy or Las Vegas. Look how far down they are. Now keep Las Vegas in the back of your mind because that's an interesting market. Now, one of the things that Ali Wolf, our chief economist, and the team, our economics team, has been thinking about is, okay, let's say we start to see listings go up. What's the implication? Well, we did the math. So check out the dotted lines. If we saw a 10% rise in resale inventory, we'd be right about this number here. So then if we go up 20%, no, let's go up 50%. We go all the way up here. We're just back to 2020 numbers. That's if we go up 50%. But let's look at it a different way too. Let's think about it from the new home share side. So, as we've seen resales go down, we've seen the inventory of single family homes on the new home side go up. But all of a sudden we have this flood of resale homes come in. What does that look like? Well, let's say it goes up 10%. Instead of being a 32 or 33% inventory share for new homes, we'd be down to about 27 or 28. Let's say we see a 20% increase in the resale inventory. Well, then the new home sale drops to about 25. Well, then let's go to 50%. Well, then we're at 22 or 23%, which, by the way, is the highest it's been since 2000, or actually go back to 1983. So it's an important comparison to think about. Now, on the new home sales side, we still have some challenges. You know, you can talk to any builder. If you're trying to buy a home, you know this. Rates and affordability are still an issue, and that is holding us back to some extent. But supply has also been an issue. Now, we could go back years and years and years in the new home industry, and weekly quick move-ins. It's the old school standing inventory. It used to be a bugaboo for builders. It used to be what banks didn't want to see. You know, if something goes wrong, we're stuck with all these homes. Well, there's a different attitude now. There's a different sheriff in town. And that sheriff is it's okay to have standing inventory. And if you can read the quote on the right from the most recent earnings call from Toll Brothers, it reads as follows. We follow the market right now. It's a strong market. We're moving from 10% spec to 40 to 50%. And we're committed to it because that's the market. Now, let's look market by market because there's a few markets. Look at Las Vegas, year over year, the quick move-in standing inventory has gone up. But for the most part, look left to right, you can see most of the markets aren't catching up. Well, let's look at it from 2019. Uh-oh, Las Vegas. Oh, goodness, that must be a bad thing. And Phoenix is up and Jacksonville is up. But using Las Vegas as an example, it has one of the tightest resale supplies. So we are backfilling that with new homes. And Steve, as we get into our conversation, to me, this is foreshadowing. This is one of the opportunities for home builders. Aside from the NAR element and relationships with brokers, just having product to sell because of the lack of supply is so very important. Here's another quick perspective we want to share. Now, this shows you the top 25 markets by starts, and you can see that the Texas markets are pretty close to the top. And as we look at that, look at the year-over-year change. Almost all the markets, with the exception of Washington and Bradenton, Sarasota, are up. And not surprising because things have moved well. If you remember the beginning part of 2023, there was still some concern and pushback from higher interest rates. Well, we've gained some velocity in the market since then. But let's see what happens when we change and really compare ourselves to 2019. Look at the circles, guys. I mean, about half of these markets are still down from 2019. Allie and I talk about this a lot in our national housing market overview. But as the markets are shifting a little bit over time, they're still terribly undersupplied with that comparison. And when we ask the builders in our monthly survey, what's your plan regarding housing starts? Look at the 2024 expectations. I mean, we're looking at 80% of the builders are anticipating starting more homes this year. So put that all in context. I think as we look into this year, and our forecast is for the single family side, just a little under 1 million homes. So it's about almost a 4% increase from 2023. But that's a pretty healthy place to start from. So Steve, if you would light the camera up and come on back to me, and let's have a conversation about what's going on with this NAR thing. Take us back a little bit. How did this start? And then take us to where we are now, and you and I will dive into this.
Hey, everybody, and thanks for joining us. This is great. You can go back a little while if you want to get right to the beginning. And what you have is, a family that wants to sell their house. They have to decide how much commission they're willing to pay, and they have choices. They have 9, 8, 7, 6. They chose 6. And then they said to their agent, well, what are we going to pay the other broker or the buyer broker? I don't want to pay them that much. And they said, well, you could do that, but then nobody's going to come look at your house. And they thought, that doesn't seem very fair. We should perhaps, look at this in a legal context. And then you fast forward a few years later, and lo and behold, we are where we are now with a multi-million-dollar settlement, changes in the way that buyer agents will be compensated. It was a $418 million settlement paid into court-controlled trust over a 4-year period. NAR has agreed to abolish all the rules, allowing sellers' agents to set compensation for buyers' agents. And it also agreed to prohibit broker compensation appearing in the MLS fields. So the agreement also notes MLS participants working with buyers must enter into a written buyer-broker agreement ahead of time. And I think, Tim, that's one of the key takeaways when you're looking at builders is you need to engage early and you need to engage often, don't you?
I would absolutely agree. And Steve, let's put some perspective on this too. There's the Department of Justice, which we're not that close to, is watching this closely. And Stephen Kim, if you're familiar with Stephen, he's one of the great housing analysts in our industry. He put out some really interesting research just in the last day or two about this. I think we have to put that in the parking lot. The DOJ element is out there. How hard they press? Do they come after the NAR? Uh, let's just say we don't know yet, and there's a lot we don't know because I think this is going to make some moves. But a few things I think we're pretty certain of, and I'll start with one. We've been asked the question, oh, is the brokerage world going away? Are agents a thing of the past? Hell no, they are not. The brokerage community is going to be in place. But if you think of this perspective, we did some research on this, and apparently, I think even the NAR tracks this, that 50% of their agents and brokers nationwide sell one home or less per year. Now, I think it's fair to say some of those people will fall off just because they're already probably not making a living wage. But on the flip side, there are very many brokerage firms and agents that are really well connected in the industry. And to me, they're not going away. And they're not going away for a number of things. And notice some of the words that I use. They're trusted advisors. They're knowledgeable on the market. And they have this magnet of potential buyers. So Steve, to me, that's one of the key opportunities for builders is an enhanced relationship with the real live brokers and the agents that are out there. The people that are a magnet for the builders, why wouldn't we want to have a better open conversation and relationship with them?
And how do you do that? How do you engage them in a different way than you have been already?
Well, part of it is by saying it out loud. All the builders say we welcome, the realtors, the agents that are in our town, we welcome them to come to us. But I think one of the things that builders have an opportunity to do is to be more purposeful, more intentional about tracking who those potential buyers are. Because as U-Tour is part of our company now. And ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't seen U-Tour, it allows you to tour a house at any hours. It uses really cool technology, and you can just basically go there on your own time. But what U-Tour has taught us is that there's a larger proportion of people at the end who close with an agent than initially walk through models without an agent. So there is a disparity there where builders being more purposeful and more intentional about tracking who those buyers are, there's an opportunity for the builder to have that relationship. And I'm not saying builders get rid of brokers, by no means, because they're, I think, a reasonable outflow or inflow of potential buyers. But it's that process, Steve, I think can be improved on behalf of the builders because it enhances two very important things: the flow of potential buyers, but also the knowledge of what they're looking for. And then there's the overarching trust where builders can be, an increasing part of the customer experience.
It's interesting, Tim, I look in the comments and I see, I think it's Kira. I'm sorry if you're saying your name wrong. Just talking about nomenclature, sort of the language around all of this is a little fuzzy. I've noticed a lot of industry pushback as well, right? You're seeing, people in high positions in the real estate industry saying it's not that significant a change, or people don't understand this that well. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. There was one in particular, Sotheby International Realty president, CEO Budge Husky. He completely took the gloves off in an Inman article. I think it was on Monday, where he's saying there's just a profound lack of understanding around the story. He outlined 7 points he wanted to push back on, mostly around the continued need for realtors and a way to clean way to pay them at the end of a transaction. And the idea that prices are going to drop, and he doesn't think they are. But how important is it to get the nomenclature right around this? We got brokers, we've got agents, we've got selling agents, buying agents, brokers. What does it all mean to me here, Tim?
Let's look at, well, there's NAR and non-NAR. So note that there's two. But let's, for purposes of our conversation today, just say there's a tranche of assistants that help with buying. And some represent a buyer, some represent a seller, some are agents, some are brokers of record. But we're putting them together right now because we're really talking about the process of bringing a buyer in and selling a home. So I don't want to disrespect brokerage because it's a harder thing to get than an agent level, but the process is really what we're talking about. And Alex asked a really interesting question about how the volume may trend with pricing, because there's always been a concern that when a buyer is being represented, a broker would push them towards a higher priced home because it's a better return for them. It's a better commission ultimately. I think that is a reasonable concern to an extent, but there's two things to consider. One is affordability. What can a person ultimately afford? And the second thing is the openness, that transparency of why are you bringing me to this certain home versus that certain home? And that's why I think the builders have such a cool opportunity, because the builders can show a palette of product, particularly if they've got 3 or 4 floor plans or 3 or 4 products within a community. And that's one of the things that I think we're going to have an opportunity to do with BDX and with Zonda. We're bringing this consumer business consumer connection all together. So it's going to widen the choices for buyers. When they look at what's out there at a price box that they can afford in a region that they're interested in, they're going to have increasing choices. And that helps. And you mentioned pricing, Steve.
Yeah.
Do I see prices going down? Not necessarily, but what I think we see is that brokerage 6% becomes fluid, and that we've got the capability of negotiating, and that allows maybe, ultimately better things for the buyer, no matter what, but also for the seller, you might be able to claw back some of that. So I think that flexibility is a positive thing.
You drag it back to sort of new homes, new builds. There was one, I think it was a university in Florida, put out some statements, sort of breaking down the settlement of what it might mean. And there was this idea that I love the quote. She said, it's a Venus flytrap situation where you're going to have people coming to new homes with no representation because they don't think they need it anymore. And essentially they're going to get taken to the cleaners because they don't have representation anymore because they think they don't need it. Is there a danger of that sort of thing happening? How do builders put themselves out there? You said trusted earlier, transparent. What are the signals they need to send in order to prevent this Venus flytrap situation for buyers?
Well, I want to bring in something that Brett just asked, and it has to do with, will anything really change? Actually, I think Pandora's box has been opened. I think now that the conversation about how these commissions were structured, maybe how they were required, quote unquote, required to make a deal happen, I think that's let some of the air out of the balloon. And that's good, because we get a chance to take a step back and restructure how this works. I think that NAR has to, they've got to represent their members. I get that. I mean, that's what they're there for. But ultimately, the purpose, the bottom line of all this is somebody buying a home. And then within that, did they get the home they want at the price they could afford? And was it a fair deal? And I think ultimately at the core, any broker, any agent really wants the buyer to be satisfied with what they have. So I hope I'm not being Pollyannish, but I do tend to be a glass half full guy. And I think that's the positive element here, that with Pandora's box opening and with these things being transparent, I think it's only good stuff.
It's interesting. And also, as you wonder why, there's some mentions in the comments, just the misinformation that goes around a big settlement like this, and a lot of that is because we just don't know a lot of stuff, right? We don't know what it's going to shake out as in the ultimate end. But the one question I found really interesting is why settle and why now, when only just in November they were saying this is not close to being final. We'll appeal the liability finding. We stand by the rules. It's in the best interest of consumers. So did some asking around to say why they might settle, and the one that really comes back is in order to pay that settlement, they'd have to secure, a bond, some sort of way to guarantee that payment. May not just have, they just don't have that amount of money. It's sort of like the Donald Trump situation with his buildings to pay for his settlements. Not all that different. But also, if they declared bankruptcy and just got out of it that way, then their members wouldn't be protected from future liability, which I think is a problem as well. So, while there is a lot of misinformation, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we just don't know the clear details yet. It's not ratified yet, right?
Yeah.
We still have to wait till July for a judge to approve this. There could be changes. There's just a lot of uncertainty. How do you navigate that uncertainty now. Should I buy a house today or should I wait until this is settled? Tim, tell me.
Well, if you are a buyer and you find the right home in a location you like, you can afford it, I'd say move forward. To me, this is not the deciding factor of whether you should buy a home or not. And Gregory brought up a good point where he just said, 6% was never the norm. We only use 6% as kind of that quote unquote number. If you look at what Redfin offers, Compass offers, there's all sorts of negotiation that goes on. But I think, Gregory, our point is simply the fact that we now have this open dialogue is the positive thing. Sean, you were asking about Washington State. I don't think we have the insights on that yet. I don't know enough about it, so we can't comment. I'm sorry about that, buddy. It's so early. Steve, back to your thing. We can only speculate about where the NAR is about this. But if you've ever been involved, unfortunately, with any kind of legal wrangling, it's emotionally taxing, it's financially taxing, and the concept of trying to make it go away, I mean, just as a human being, you can see that there's some motivation for that. But you said the key thing, Steve. We don't know yet. We don't know exactly which way this is going to go. And remember what I said about the Department of Justice and what Stephen Kim was following. They're out there too, and we're not sure what's motivating them.
Tim, I saw a LinkedIn post the other day. I think you may have seen it too. And it was one of the builders celebrating the fact that they had paid almost $1 billion in fees to realtor partners, they called them, over the last 2 years. So a lot of money tied up in paying, realtors to bring people through the houses. How do you think that relationship changes because of this? I mean, there's billions of dollars at stake there.
That's a tough one. Think about relationships too. Sarah just asked that question, kind of related, where, what's the opinion of how a relationship between a buyer's agent and a buyer changes when the buyer's agent has to disclose the commission he's being paid by a builder when the builder has a commission built the sales price. I think it goes back to that transparency thing. And, I'm not working for a builder right now, so we'd have to ask the builders about how they do that going forward. But you can just look in the papers and in the media. D.R. Horton came out and said, hey, we believe in brokers. We believe in the agents. We believe in working with them. But Mary, I think the key thing is what's going on with the disclosure part of it.
Sorry, my computer froze up there for a second.
Marcy just asked a question. This is an interesting one. She said, I work for a builder and my sales team typically understands our contract paperwork better than the general broker agent. In our market, which is Northern California, the broker agents tend to walk through a model once with their clients and then the salespeople take over, guiding the process. And I think that's pretty typical, Marcy. And I think you guys know a lot more being part of the builder process. You know a lot more about it. It'll be interesting to see, and Marcy, I'd put some more in the chat. I'd be interested in your take on if you think this is going to change let's say the brokerage and agency behavior. Will it change at all with this? Because you're the one in a sales office with your team. So send that back to us and let us know, because you're living this every day. And let us know if you agree or disagree. But ultimately, we're trying to decode this darn thing, and it's gotten so much media attention. We figured we should dive in and start the conversation.
Absolutely. I see Pete has an interesting comment as well, where he said one key issue is the uncertainty among consumers regarding the need to use an agent to purchase a new home at all. And that they've been willing to pay the normal 3%, sort of the standard fee, but now there's going to be some confusion about whether or not that goes to a flat fee, whether that goes to 1%. Again, you hate to say that we have to wait and see. But Tim, do we have to wait and see?
Sort of. I think already some builders are making some changes. Let's see. Mary, was it? No, we already talked about that. There's an interesting comment. Brent mentioned there's a lot of misinformation in the press, and such as it'll end the 6% commissions. His statement was, we haven't had a solid 6% for 10 plus years. Commission in his market is between 4 and 7%. So has always been some level of negotiation, and we've been telling sellers commission is negotiable for more than 20 years. Now, he says two firm things right now as a result of the suit. No buyer brokerage posted in the MLS, and must have a buyer contract in writing before I represent a buyer. So that's good input. We also got a question about how the builders are tracking this. And Steve, I almost feel like a follow-up is needed where we get two or three of the builders in about how they're responding to this. And guys, it may be one of three things. We're not doing anything. Wait and see. We're going to make little small changes, or we're already taking, we're taking control and we're putting processes in place to track this a little bit more consistently.
I can tell you, just sort of an interesting aside from the media perspective and why, I'm the head of content. I come from traditional media, so I have some insight into the way that works and why that misinformation is the way it is in a lot of cases. But, Builder Online is a publication that Zonda owns, so builderonline.com. You can go there anytime. Subscribe to our newsletter, please. Phones builders constantly for comment on stories like this. And at this point, what you're getting back is not touching it. Right? We're just not touching it right now. We're gonna wait. We're gonna see. Not willing to talk about it publicly. So when you're trying to make that scorecard of winners or losers, it's hard to do. So you end up looking to places like the stock market, which has been really interesting, where you've seen builders have risen in the past couple since the settlement. Remax, some of the brokerages have dropped. Zillows of the world have gone flat. But everybody's almost come back. In a week there was a lot of movement, but in that week since, everybody's sort of gone back to where they were, again, reflecting that level of uncertainty, whether anything's going to change at all. So, Tim, on your scorecard, what do you think is a winner-loser situation here? Is it that clear?
Actually, I've got a couple things I will share, but I want to jump into the comments because we've gotten some great comments. And Beth, you were asking about builders changing, how do we see builders changing what they pay buyers agents? Steve, that's exactly why I said, let's get the feedback from the builders, the ones that'll share.
Yeah.
And Tony said a really interesting thing. He said the builder should consider paying a referral fee in lieu of a full commission. Dustin asked, do we think transaction volume would increase as transaction costs decrease? Dustin, this is a correlation and causation element. I think there's a correlation because of the factors that I shared with at the very beginning of this: undersupply, new home product coming out, and interest rates probably inching down. But I can't say that I'm confident that this movement in the potential cost transaction cost is really going to make a material difference. Brent, we talked about yours. One, you mentioned the headlines being so misleading. The NAR doesn't set our commission rates and never has. Also, ultimately, he said their team has been a leader in best practices. Their fees are fully disclosed and explained at the very beginning, upfront, especially for a buyer's agent. Our fees have always been negotiable. That's what I love hearing. Tony, you mentioned you're a broker, and Zillow needs to adjust what they charge for leads. There's I just lost you for a second. Hold on. We're coming in fast. Apparently, you're spending $3,200 monthly for Zillow leads. If compensation changes, you're at risk at losing those transactions. Andy, thank you for your comment. You said your understanding is we will not advertise what we're going to pay for the buyer's agent. All right, that's fair. And then Marcy, I appreciate what you said. You said you're not likely to change your process. There's value in having the broker's agents bring their clients to sales offices. In this case, competition with other builders. If they stop offering commission to buyer agents, then I might consider lowering my fee. It depends on the market. Great feedback. Thad, you asked, how does the settlement change existing inclusive rights to sell agreements that are based on 6% commission being paid out by the builder to the listing brokerage? Guys, I need to go to you to answer that question because that's something I simply don't know. And as you can see, Steve, we've gotten probably 50 comments so far. So this is definitely a hot topic. Christine, my old friend, I see you in there. You said, I believe as builders, we will see a higher percentage of inside deals. However, you think an unintended consequence will be more regulatory challenges with dual agency a year or two from now. I'm wondering whether the builders will start to proactively partner with outside brokers. I think that's a good likelihood, Christine. And then the ones that are familiar with their contracts but didn't bring the buyers, will they be able to represent buyers for a smaller flat fee to limit their liability with dual agency. That's good stuff. By the way, Venice has said that working for a builder in Denver, you're hearing news of sales leaders throughout the market, and most are waiting to see. Steve, that was exactly what you were asking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's where we're at. And, we have a list of, suggestions of what needs to be done now, and we'll get to those, sort of 5 takeaways that we promised. But, a lot of it is about getting your house in order, staying on top of the news, trying not to get too frustrated at the things you read that drive you crazy. I know there's been a few all cap messages in there, which indicates that there's a lot of emotion running through this as well. Both on both sides of it, right? Because you're talking people's livelihoods and you're talking about an industry that has functioned in a certain way for a very long amount of time.
Right on. No doubt about it. Sarah brought up something that's really interesting. And she said, don't you think the buyers will get cold feet working with the buyer's agent once the buyer's agent discloses that they will earn a $12,000 commission and on average price home of $400,000 at a 3% commission rate? Won't the buyers have an incentive to cancel the relationship with the buyer's agent and buy directly from the builder? And Sarah, that's one of the factors that we think is floating out there, that many of the builders will look at that as an opportunity. But there are many of the big builders too that recognize the relationship is important and the flow of potential buyers is important. So my personal opinion is we don't lose all of that activity, but I do think builders have a specific opportunity based exactly on the question you asked. Steve, what else do you have for us? Because I've got a couple things that I want to close with. I don't want to keep everybody on all day. We've been together for a little over 30 minutes. What else do
No,
we
I
need to
think
talk about?
I'm absolutely delighted with the quality of the questions, and I think you just ran through them in a really nice way. So why don't we move on to what you were going to say? What were you going to say, Tim?
Well, here it is. I think from the standpoint of all the constituencies that are out there, and I'll use an alliterative process, like Steve, we love doing that. The builder, broker, buyer, and yes, I'm being unfair. Broker includes agents and so forth, but builder, broker, buyer have opportunities here. And in my opinion, and this is Tim's opinion, this is not necessarily Zonda's opinion, that the organizations that are out there earlier with intentionality that are saying, here's our process, and we're here to help the buyer, whether it's a builder or a broker, helping the buyer, I think they will get some love from the market. I think they'll also get a disproportionate share of attention. The transparency is not necessarily a bad thing. And your questions today, guys, were terrific. I think we'll probably do a follow-up if we can get some builders on there to go into the builder side and maybe even an agent or broker with us. The other thing is it brings in financial flexibility. And to me, that's good. Will it decrease prices like you heard the question? I don't think directly, but that flexibility, as a buyer, I like that idea. I like being a little bit more in control. And then the point I want to make very clearly is we, as Zonda, do not believe the brokerage community, the agents go away, by no means. But some of the fringe agents, just like in build to rent, where we're very big right now, there's a lot of developers that dove into it, and they were tourists. They didn't really belong in this space. That's the same with some of the part-time brokers. We may lose them. But the professionals, they're here to stay. And the opportunity for builders is very significant. There's the increasing relationship opportunity with the buyer. There's building more trust in the consumer experience, helping them through that process. There's the element of financial flexibility, which I just mentioned. I love that from the buyer standpoint. Improved data capture platforms. By the way, along those lines, I think we'll see more people move into the self-tours. U-Tour, I think, is going to continue increasing in its usage because you're on your own. You can do your own decision. You don't have somebody looking over your shoulder. And then last but not least, there is the element of uncertainty. And Steve, you mentioned that. Stephen Kim was asking about, the Department of Justice. The whole process is supposed to be coming to fruition in July. There's a lot to think about between now and then, but we just wanted to help you guys have a platform to think about it. Thank you for your questions. They were terrific. And reach out to us if you have specific questions, because Steve, I think part 2 of this is that we revisit this in a little bit of time with a builder and a broker. Do you agree?
I agree. And, builderonline.com, sign up for our newsletters. We'll take a look at these questions and answer as many of them as we can in an article. So keep your eyes open for that. I think there's some of these questions, I mean, they're so good. I don't want to pull an answer out of my hat when we could research them and give proper answers. So we're gonna
Right
get to
on.
work on that right away.
Right on. Well, with that, if you guys will notice, we will more than welcome any questions, send it to us here. Also, if you've got any interest in any of the product that we have, guys, reach out. We'd be happy to help you. But most importantly, thanks for being with us. You'd be really surprised at how many people ultimately joined this within a week. I mean, way over 1,000 people were lining in. So great questions, guys. We will revisit this. Thank you for the insights on behalf of Steve and myself and our entire marketing team. Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. We'll keep talking. Thank you. Bye-bye.